Hi, Susan. Thanks for joining me today. This is a really exciting kickoff for both of us, I think. We've both been around and known each other for several years. I've known you as a fleet industry analyst for years. I mean, going back at least 10 years, I think, since we've began engaging and talking on a regular basis. And I'm really excited to be able to work with you now on, I think, this really important research that's very much needed, how AI may impact the fleet industry and specifically, the decision-making that both suppliers have to make around where do they incorporate AI into their tech stack? How do they talk about it? There's a lot of baffle-gap around AI. Just use AI as a throwaway expression and hope that the person you're selling to understands what you mean. And they don't, So there's a lot of nuance in AI, a lot of vocabulary in AI. And it's really important at this moment that we're able to be educating, I think, both supplier and industry fleet managers and specialist professionals and people that are in the ecosystem around fleet in terms of, how to make decisions going forward. We're in 2026 and we're right in the middle of it right now. It's very clear that AI is here. We are making decisions on a almost weekly basis right now, but how do I navigate AI? Is this a hype bubble that this one vendor is selling me, or is it really something I want to roll my sleeves up on? So it's important that we conduct research. And that's where I've known you, I think, in the industry as a really an objective researcher. I've always appreciated your approach. So just talk to me about, first off, what do you like about the fleet industry in general? I think for many of your years, you've been involving around fleet. So just talk to me about your experience in fleet and what you like about fleet industry in general.
Excellent. Thank you, Colin. So it's been over 12 years now that I've covered fleet in some capacity, either from a provider or as a part of a research organization. And I've seen multiple transformation in both the automotive and the commercial vehicle portion of the fleet. And what's fascinated me isn't just the tech itself. It's not technology for technology's sake, but it's how that technology actually shows up in the real world for drivers, for fleets, for the broader ecosystem, and for the companies that are operating across those intersection points. So my work has spanned everything from hardware to software and the bigger picture, things like regulation, user experience, and even societal impact. So at the end of the day, innovation only matters if it works, not just technically, but practically and responsibly for the people and the systems that it impacts.
I couldn't agree more. That's why I also like fleet. I think that the fleet industry there's one part of fleet, which is the maintenance and the total cost of ownership of the actual asset itself. But many businesses rely on their vehicles to conduct their work. Their vehicles are an extension of their actual business itself. So it's vital. It's absolutely vital, not just in trucking. It's vital in many, many industries, from local residential services all the way through first response, all the way up into transportation and logistics. Now, talking about research though, because this is the differentiation, I want to make sure that we're fully letting our audience know your approach
Mhm.
to research. I've seen a lot of research in the industry, and it's basically surveys that go out one way. You answer a survey, it comes back, and you get a generated response. That's not been my experience in working with you. Very much a hands-on approach. And I've seen things even where you've created a quadrant, not to talk about Gartner, and Gartner research's magic quadrant. And I asked Gartner in the past, why aren't you doing a magic quadrant for fleet? And he said, because it's too difficult and it's too nuanced and we don't know how to create a magic quadrant for fleet. So we haven't done it. And yet the last research I read of yours, which was about 4 years ago, when you ranked innovation and all these elements around fleet, you created, I think, a really novel, almost magic quadrant. You could literally plot on an X and Y axis where specific vendors appeared according to a couple of different variables. Maybe you could walk me through just your overall approach to research, how you are taking approach to this particular research assignment. How do you think you'll be accumulating results and what your approach is? And specifically, do you think we might actually be able to achieve some kind of a quadrant or an X and Y axis as an output from the research?
I think that's great. So let me zoom out a little bit and then we'll zoom in a little bit. So, one of the decisions that I made for this research is to step back and look at the market through a broader lens. So, not just the technology features and the financials, but really a matrix of both the business and the technology features together. So, the more holistic view really helps surface what some of the true strengths are and what the trade offs are amongst different companies and providers. And honestly, as you say, measuring the market isn't really straightforward. So, for example, revenue sounds like an obvious metric, but it's really surprisingly different to pin that down. So, multiple companies are private, for example, and even the public companies, of which we can name a number, they don't necessarily break out the detailed revenue for specific solutions or even specific organizations. So that's part of it. And honestly, measuring that is difficult to pin down. So, for example, subscriptions, right? Many companies look at subscriptions and they use it as a proxy for growth or market share. But that gets complicated. Some providers, as we've discussed, count multiple devices within the vehicle, or tools is another example as separate subscriptions. So that's really a multiplier effect that may not really be an accurate representation. And there's varying levels of transparency. So you add in the competitive dynamics. You have OEMs, you have traditional telematics players, you have now cloud native software companies, and they're all overlapping and competing in different ways. So it's really less about a single metric and more about understanding the structure of the market and what those numbers actually represent. So part of what we are doing is creating some of these AI capability metrics. And so we can look at things like AI safety and video intelligence, predictive maintenance, as you've mentioned, different types of fleet intelligence and benchmarking, workflow and automation. So there's a lot of different things. So I do believe we can create a specific metric. So we can really look at things from how companies perform and then a little bit of where we think they're headed, as well as what their technology innovation, and then to get beyond some of the, I'll call it washing, so AI washing, and you had an even better term, I believe, but basically kick the tires, get under the hood in parlance of vehicles and see what's actually driving success metrics and what those metrics are and where they're headed from there. So I think that's important. And some of that gets into things like definition and strategy and scope and how we can determine the actual results and the uptake by talking all the way down the value chain to the drivers and the fleet managers and what they're actually using versus what is promoted in the market.
Yeah, clearly this is not research that's going to happen in 30-day window. This is going to be intense landmark research that currently doesn't exist and is very, very much needed across all of our brands here at our business at Bobbitt Business Media. In the fleet world, we've covered this for decades, literally decades, from automotive fleet and work truck and heavy duty trucking, school bus, fleet magazines, metro magazines for public transportation, all the way into some of the other aspects of charge fleet, business fleet for small business owners. In fact, I was just reading for work truck. This is our latest issue of Work Truck magazine. AI, the future of fleet is here. I just received this in the mail a couple of weeks ago. I subscribe to our own magazine, which is awesome. But truly, I think on the mind of every single one of our editorial staff and of our readers is how is AI going to impact us on an individual level, at a macro level, business owners looking at how should I embrace AI. I would have loved to hear from you is how you think of our individual brands. We've got multiple editors here. We've got multiple different groups and audiences from class, 1 vehicles all the way through class 8. So I'm just interested in how do you think you're going to be able to achieve working together? How do you want to work with our team here at Bobbitt Business Media and yourself to achieve these goals?
Excellent point. So, as we talked about, AI has become one of those terms that we hear in the boardrooms and press releases, and especially as we see big transformational moments. So, we know this has gone on for some time, but really, since the advent of more widespread generative AI over the last less than 3.5 years, it's really picked up a lot. but a lot of time it's used without a clear definition and without the clear metrics. And so how do we decide what success looks like for the fleet manager, for the driver, for these companies, whether it be a fleet or a telematics company? So if you're not deep into the space, it's really understandable how the lines blur and what's the difference between just the terminology. What's really machine learning, which has been around for a very long time, and that versus AI? How is generative AI, where we see a lot of consumer use of those tools? And then what's coming next after that? So, really, those distinctions matter, including in vehicles. And that's really what I want to get after. So, what I want to do for working with BBM and the audience of BBM is to really demystify it. What does AI mean in the vehicle space today? Where is it truly being applied versus just marketed? Where is it headed over the next couple of years? And most importantly, what does that all mean for the fleet manager who's trying to run a business, manage risk, control costs, support drivers? So, at the core of this research, my goal is really to help fleet professionals level up, both personally and organizationally. The nature of their work is changing, and the competitive landscape is also changing. And these capabilities, as they change, I want to make sure that that evolution feels approachable and not overwhelming. So, although there's still a lot of mystery around this, I'd like to take some of that mystery out and empower these fleets to take a more active role in shaping not only their own careers, but reacting to that change. And then for suppliers, this is also a pivotal moment. The solution landscape is transforming in a way that honestly reminds me of the early internet and the app eras. So entire categories are shifting. We see new entrants emerging or players that weren't in the space before. And so then the lines of hardware, software, and services are really blurring. So the real strategic question is around data ownership, access, monetization, and governance. So it's not just about adopting a tool, it's about rethinking how the ecosystem works and where you fit inside it.
The challenge with research like this, and I agree with everything you've just said, is including, the vocabulary from, and some people don't even bother saying it out loud. They use ML, LLM, Gen AI. I think that one of the things that we need to do is make sure we're talking about what is ML. And not everybody knows machine learning, large language model, generative AI. These are all important things that we need to make sure we're explaining properly as we're going through the research. And of course, there's the consumer part of what we've been exposed to over the last few years, the ChatGPT and Claude and Grok and other things that we're hearing about in the news about AI. What is all that in terms of a platform? I think the other part though is bias. And so this is the challenge that a lot of suppliers have, quite honestly, the disconnect between the supplier ecosystem and the user ecosystem. The
Yeah.
supplier ecosystem, who's all in, excited about AI, they're incorporating these tools. Meanwhile, the person that they're selling to practically says, I just want to solve my problem. I've seen that in some recent research that we've conducted where the gap between the supplier ecosystem, which was advocating all these amazing AI tools that they had, and the person they were selling to, it was such a wide communication gap that quite frankly, it was causing a lot of stress amongst the buyers out there saying, I just want to solve my problem. And you're not telling me how you're going to solve my problem. You're talking to me about tech stack and all this stuff that quite frankly, I'm not relating to. So hopefully we can help bridge that gap. And I think clearly we have to disclose their own biases and just, my personal bias is that I want to do what's right for the fleet industry. And I want to make sure that we're navigating it. And I'll tell you that my personal bias also, my personal feeling, which is also bias, is that I think we're at a moment of AI enabling the democratization of data in a way that's been held captive by many industry suppliers for the past several years. And what I mean
Yes.
by that is going back into history. We had this debate with my previous employment for 25 years in the industry of the closed ecosystem versus the open ecosystem.
Yes.
And the closed ecosystem were demonstrated by some of the very large early trucking leaders that had their platform. They recorded data, but they also had incredible software that reached right into the back office, HR, employment, payroll, tax, everything. And so you bought a platform and it was managing everything for you. And if you saw a really cool product that you maybe, read about or you saw it at an event, and you wanted to incorporate that into your business, you had a hard time doing that because everything else in your tech stack was incredibly closed. It was isolated and built
Yes.
around this closed ecosystem. The opposite to that was the open ecosystem, which I fully embraced, which was, hey, we're a business provider. We collect data and we enable it to be consumed. At the same time, we expose the software by API, application processing interface. So we have this idea for people to be able to share data. Had to explain the acronym there, API. I think I
Yeah.
got it right. My former colleagues will yell at me if I got it wrong, and they'll laugh at me actually if I got it wrong because I always used to tease them about API. Which is it's the ability to scale exchanges of data between one software platform and another software platform to be able to do that. That has nothing to do with API at all or the AI at all. API has been around for a long, long time, for many, many, many years, allowing software to speak to software effectively. Well, in this case, the ability for software to support a data exchange with an AI agent on top might very well mean that even a startup company who's got a great innovative idea, if they're innovating, how much effort do they spend in developing their user interface itself, dashboards, reports, and things on the user interface side, versus how much effort are they in the data collection and exposing their data to the world so that another future AI layer can sit on top of it and it's going to be the user interface. So the dependency of people, this is where I'm hoping your research is going to flesh this out, quite frankly, is what is the future of the dashboard? What is the future
Yeah.
of notification engines being created? And does this in fact mean that the platforms that we've been buying that may have been really keeping us captive in a lot of ways are now going to be opened up to enable me to be able to go and select the right solution for what I need as long as it's, compatible with my AI agent that I'm talking to, which means the future of dashboards, reports, Excel spreadsheets and all that 3 or 4 years from now, my personal thought process is that's going to be a thing of the past. By the year 2030, I don't want to ever see a dashboard again. I just want to have a conversation with my little friendly AI agent every morning saying, this is what I'm looking to do today. And it's going to remind me and tell me what I need to work on because it's connected to 4 or 5 different platforms that I've decided are my industry best practice for how I want to run my own company. And that's democracy. That's enabling new startups to create new products, whether they agent level or at the supplier level. I hope that that's what the research is able to go and unbiased, without bias of large company or small, evaluate where this could possibly go and what are the questions that a person procuring software or platform, no matter where it is in your entire business, from HR and time card keeping all the way through, safety, maintenance, and efficiency and routing and scheduling. I'm hoping that we're going to be able to find a path through the research that tells us this is where the industry is headed. But I really also do hope that we're able to close that communication gap between supplier ecosystem and user ecosystem and make sure that we're able to create that common vocabulary and the common understanding of how fast we need to move forward here on the supplier side in order to serve our current customers and also be prepared for success in the next 2 to 3 years. So with that said, how are you going to conduct this research? I mean, what are your thoughts on conducting it all? Because we're eating an elephant here. This is an
Yeah.
awful lot, right? We need to take this one bite at a time. So talk to me about how you think you'll conduct it.
I agree completely. And that's where I could see this being a roadmap with an iterative process. So we tackle the foundations and where we're at now this year, and then potentially have another iteration as we learn more, as fleets learn more. And I will say, I have a heart especially for the small and medium fleets, which are really the backbone of the US and other countries as well. So they don't have the same resources financially, headcount, et cetera, to be developing a huge model, right? They may not even have a large IT organization. So they're going to be looking, and they could be looking at open source. They could be looking at, like you said, particular agents and things. So that's part of the parsing out is what may be applicable for a Fortune 500 company versus your 50 vehicles or less or 10 vehicles or less are going to be very different needs. And then beyond that of different verticals, your public slash government is going to be probably very different than people that are moving general goods and services about. So all of those are consideration. But the heart of everything I do is primary research, and that's how I approach these studies. There is tremendous value in-depth interviews with people at a particular point in time. That's across roles, organizations, geographic, right? So you really need to get in. Some of that could come at a conference, some of that could come on a phone call with someone. So really diverse points of view, people that have a lot of experience and knowledge, people that are just learning and questioning why and if I'm going to lose my job and things of that nature. So really getting a ground level view. After that, I layer in things like surveys, and surveys will give you the defensible metrics that you're looking for that given point in time. And so that really provides statistical, meaningful results. And that gives us a way to quantify what people are experiencing and compare those trends in the market over a period of time. After that, I layer in secondary research. So that's absolutely not Googling or ChatGPT, but that's verified company data. That could be a 10K annual report, government data sets that look at things like employment, that can be trusted industry sources. The real goal is to triangulate all of that information. So taking those multiple data points and those perspectives and seeing if that points in the same direction. And that gives you confidence in the particular results. And that's the goal, not just, oh, this is interesting information, but these are insights that are grounded in evidence, and we want them to be actionable for the industry. What's going on now with my peers? What's going on in the industry? What should I be considering now? How should I evolve with that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. One of the challenges that I think we have with the research in terms of level setting time is that AI is evolving literally weekly itself, right? So if it's evolving weekly and we set out to do research starting in the month of March 2026, well, we want to go and have you present your findings in a white paper format at Fleet Forward conference in October,
Mhm.
which is an amazing conference that we put together here at Bobbit every year, talking about the future of fleet, where it's headed. But between now and October, we know that the state of AI in March is going to be very, very different in September. And I think that's one of the challenges here. So what you're saying, I think, is the correct approach. Is initially we want to create this as a foundation. So
Yes.
capture the vocabulary, capture the sentiment, do some deep industry interviews that you'll be conducting. But on an ongoing basis, we're committing to doing this assignment. This is not a one and done situation where we think we've published the report and we're finished. I think this is truly something that if people want to follow along and subscribe to the research itself, they can go ahead and do that. And they'll get updates on a quarterly basis of where you're at. They'll get the
Mhm.
white paper in October when we produce that. And then on an ongoing basis, we have the opportunity for people to ask individual questions or group questions from the supplier side or from the fleet side. You may have that in some of the interviews that you conduct where the fleets tell you, you know what I'd really like to know, Susan, is the following things. And then you could incorporate that into future research that we're constantly bringing forward. So I think we're really looking here for truly what I would call landmark foundation level research for the fleet industry, which I think is very important. Are there any, I know this is, I declared my bias and what I'm hoping to find out. Do you have any thoughts specifically or any excitement points that you're going to particularly be kind of hunting for, or looking for in the early days of your surveying and your interviews?
Excellent question. So I really want to understand initially what tools, what products are in use at various fleets, from the very small fleets up to the large enterprise fleets. So not only what they've procured, but beyond all the buzzwords, what are they using and what results have they seen from that? So I want to get real very quickly to understand that. And that's part of the foundation. So get away from the buzz and get down to what is potentially transformational already. And then you have the fear, uncertainty, doubt that I'm certain I will come across of people worried about job loss or how much work they have to put into learning these things. So I think that's really getting at the heart of what I think is most important to start out.
Mhm.
And then there's plenty of things that I can understand on a deeper level when it comes to the evolution of the technologies. But I think we're going to see a divide, especially when you get into some of the smaller companies, of what's available versus what is actually used in practice, especially on the commercial generative AI front, on anything from the driver experience all the way to the back office. And you mentioned dashboards as another thing. And I think the other thing is people aren't aware of how fast the competition is evolving. Instead of looking at one telematics company versus another, which I did quite a bit of, what about someone like AWS, for example? Is that even on someone's radar of where they can own a lot of the tech stack and they can own the data? So that would be just one example of really trying to parse out things that people aren't, it is even on their proverbial radar yet.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel that we're at that moment of, if I'm building anticipation towards wanting to involve myself and follow the research, and anybody that wants to follow along with research, subscribe to it, can simply email solutions@bobbit.com. That's solutions plural, solutions at bobit.com. They can absolutely email us and we'll make sure that we'll be in touch with them. They can ask questions, they can engage with you to be involved in the questions and answers initially. And then think that that's important that we allow folks to know how they can reach out and be participating. But one of the challenges that when I think about me personally, if I know this research is being produced, I wonder from a fleet perspective, yeah, I want to read it because I want to be informed. So I'm really going to be looking forward to your analysis of how should I have a conversation with all of my suppliers and asking them whether I'm going to RFP or if I have a specific supplier,
Mm.
what should I be asking specifically of them, right? So then there's a very practical business reason why I would want to read this research. The other is very much existential. I think it's, what is my future job and what is the career path here? And am I at risk? And what can I do personally to educate myself so that I am valuable to my employer over the next, 5 to 10 plus years? We want to encourage people to come in fleet. Don't want to discourage them, but clearly AI is almost inherently, like this year, it's just all about discouraging people. What jobs should you not have because AI is going to take your job? And we've had that question in fleet for 10 years. What is the
Yes.
future of the fleet manager? Why do we need a fleet manager? Is it a facilities manager? I think that the existential question, I hope, will also come out. I think it will come out in some of the questions. You're certainly going to be hearing about that from an anxiety perspective. On the
Yes.
supplier side, you're going to want to hear from suppliers are going to know from this research, how can I replace the fleet manager? Is there a way for me to create an AI agent that literally replaces the fleet manager? The fleet manager is going to way, I don't want to do that. But on the other hand, this is a really interesting moment because in fleet, we've always talked about mentorship and passing the baton to the next generation. And a lot of traditional fleet managers that have been in the industry for, 25 plus years are retiring and they very much want to get back. A lot of them who are active in the industry want to get back. They want to have that succession plan and give the baton to the next generation, inspire that 30-year-old to come into the industry. I'm hoping that this is going to help navigate some of that and not just by saying I'm going to pass the baton to an AI agent, which is the obvious answer. If I could download all of my experience into my AI agent and then save it, you could create Fleet Manager in a box. And that's my successor. The part about Fleet is community. There is this incredible, engaging community around Fleet that is people oriented. And I think many of us in Fleet want to preserve that at the people aspect of Fleet. And this is, I think, the existential thing that is going to be debated. We're going to continue on with the research. We have to do it. I think we have to do it specifically to find the path and to define for people that are in fleet what their role is and how they can continue to make sure that as individuals, our creativity, our institutional knowledge, which can't be passed along to an AI agent, how the industry evolves itself, AI or not, how the industry actually evolves, how we're dealing with the increasing of fuel prices, which are going up right now at the
Yes.
pump. What are the decisions I have to make as a field manager today because my cost of fuel just increased by 30 cents a gallon? What am I going to do about that? These are things that are moments that absolutely are very people oriented moments. I hope that comes across. I hope we were able to go and help people navigate their career, through this research. So it's very widespread, Susan, an awful lot that we're taking on here together. I'm excited
Yes.
about it. This is, defining moment for my career and for yours as well. We're in a really interesting place, but we both have such industry experience, no passion about the industry. I'm confident that we're going to be able to produce some great body of work with the support of both the fleet community as well as the fleet management community as well as the supplier community. And I just want to thank you for embarking on the journey with me on this very, very important landmark survey and research. I couldn't think of anybody that I would rather do this more with than you.
Well, I appreciate that so much, and I've loved our partnership over the dozen or so years that we've worked together. And I will say, as far as some of the angst, which is real, of course, there's a lot of societal and governance issues too. There was not that long ago that people were concerned about driverless semi trucks taking over the roads, and not that there aren't advances there, but it hasn't in any notable manner replaced drivers. So there are things where we've seen increased automation, but not replacement. So in some ways with I see that it adds factors from a software perspective. So things evolve, but aren't necessarily replaced, to your point.
Exactly right. Well, with that, to use some AI language, we'll prompt our audience
Yes.
to again email solutions@bobbit.com to stay in touch on this research. We have our great deck that we're sending out to the supplier industry to encourage their active participation with us. And I really look forward to rolling up our sleeves together starting this month. Susan, thanks very much for joining me here today.
I agree. Thank you, Colin. And I will look forward to hearing from any of our industry partners.
We'll be there soon. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.